Ladies and gentlemen, what's happening now? By press and play, you are stepping into an unforgettable night when Derry City faced Lokomotiv Sofia in the Cup Winners' Cup, marking the first European fixture that I had ever attended. This historic event in August 10th of 1995 ended Derry City's 30-year wait for a European victory, making it a night of legends. When I set up this interview, I expected a story of valiant heroes and triumph. What I uncovered instead was one man's gripping account of a trip from hell. Join us as we dive into this extraordinary tale, blending the thrill of victory at home at the Brandywell with the raw, unexpected challenges faced away. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm about to get Derry nostalgic with Felix Healy.
Well, the landscape has changed dramatically since then. For example, going back even further, when I was playing, you got Benfica. I was lucky enough to play against Everton, play against Spurs, Lokomotiv, Leipzig, who were basically the East German team. That won't happen nowadays unless you get the group stage. The teams have quadrupled, even more expansion in terms of. So the chances of you doing better in Europe nowadays are much better than it was then. Once we got Lokomotiv Sofia, it wasn't the worst draw in the world, being the part-time nature that it was back then, where guys trained twice a week. You didn't have most of them you only trained together maybe an hour on a Saturday morning. You could throw some set pieces and five-a-side. It's a different kettle of fish nowadays.
What was the general reaction? Did you think it was an easy draw, hard draw?
I thought it was okay. Back then, it wasn't a case of, like we're sitting this morning and who Derry are going to meet, possibly 4 or 5 clubs. It wasn't like that then. So you're just going to have to happen. Just you take whatever you get. A Bulgarian team, you would think that technically they were going to be decent. They were going to be great travellers. From my experience of playing in Europe, they would come over and basically not really they play without exerting themselves, and then when you go over there, it's a different kettle of fish. The lead up to the game was weird. And then the pitch was like concrete. It was a seriously dry spell, and I was out standing in the middle of the pitch, 8 o'clock at night, watering the pitch myself. And then I was back the following morning at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, watering the pitch myself as the manager, watering the pitch while everybody else is standing watching me. But that was the way things were back in the day. In those days, you weren't even allowed to warm up the pitch. So it was quite an adventure. The game itself, I didn't think there was much in it on the night. Obviously, Harry scored a wonder goal, picked it up in the showgrounds and drove past 7 or 8 players and stuck it in the back of the net. Whether the ball was over the line or not, to be fair, when I saw it in real time, I said, that looks like it might be over. I think it was the first time we'd won a European match since the FK Lund match. I was at the FK Lund. I was behind the net that Jimbo didn't score on. That was one of the great European nights of all time. Back, when I was a kid. But to win a European match at the Brandywell was incredible. Was incredible. And they I know they don't travel too well, but they didn't take with the feet well. The manager wouldn't even shake hands with me and walked off and stormed off. I think they were still annoyed about the goal.
The goal you have picked up on, it has been romanticised by Harry McCourt over the years. I'll tell you what he actually said in the Derry Journal that was picked up. He actually said on the 11th of August, Derry Journal, talking to Desi McKillian, that it was a skite and the one carried it in, but in a retrospective in 2020, he allegedly picked the ball up and outside his own box and, as you said, ringed everybody and knocked it into the top bucket. But how do you remember it yourself without the sarcasm, of course?
Harry McCourt was a bit like Paddy, but Harry was quicker than Paddy. Paddy, as a lot of people have said, Paddy could only run when he had the ball, and Harry was worse when he didn't have the ball. But when Harry took off, Harry was as quick a player as at that time. He was lightning fast. I think there was circumstances he ended up playing wide right for me. I can't actually remember the circumstances, but he ended up playing wide right. And I just remember him going down and you expected him to go past somebody and cross the ball and whatever. Really, the keeper, I think, misjudged it, and it ended up, from what I can remember, it looked, I don't even think it took a deflection, but it just seemed to veer into this. And it's one of those, you're not going to complain if the referee gives it. you'd feel hard done by what was given against you. That's the nature of the beast.
Yeah, rumour in the end was that at half time the officials were surrounded in the old changing room building. If anybody does remember, it was the building obviously off at the showgrounds then, and there was a lot of abuse hurled at the referee. Do you remember witnessing anything, or was it even true?
I don't know. I don't recall that at all. I mean, at that particular time, when you go into the dressing room, like, the least of your worries is what's going on next door or whatever. Basically, just focus on what you want to do yourself.
Back in 1985, you had what was known as the Thorner Rule, where you could only play 3 players that weren't born in your jurisdiction. You were trying very hard to get Stuart Gold and Pascal Vatican Irish passports so that you were able to pick 3 of your 4 players, or even just have Sandy and Paul come on. How long did that process go on before you could get the clearance from them to actually play as Irish citizens?
To be honest, I don't know. I remember driving Paul McLaughlin to Belfast to get a passport and get it. Basically, we had to wait. But we were lucky. There was a couple of people in the SDLP who had close friends who worked at both the passport office in Belfast and also in Dublin, which was a great help back in the day. But in regards to the issues like that, there's so many things that go on at the time that nobody ever hears about.
2 weeks later, you go off to Bulgaria. What was the trip like?
Killed the entire season. From start to finish, it was a disaster. It's the only time, for example, the Saturday after we got back, I think on the Thursday. On the Saturday, the entire board and the entire playing staff had a meeting in the old Glentoran stand, I think around 4 o'clock on a Saturday afternoon. Never, ever been done before, and I don't think it's ever happened since. It was that bad. I mean, I have a fear of flying, and I was down the back of the plane. We done the plane, I mean, we took off, and there were people actually standing on the plane when we took off. You know, it was horrendous. We got there in the middle of the night, everybody's starving, there was nothing to eat. The food in Sofia, the pre-match meal, for example, was supposed to be spaghetti bolognese. It was like a soup. It was horrendous. There was 1 or 2 issues, with long-standing issues with a couple of players. 1 or 2 that had a drink on the plane. One guy came to me in the airport and said, I'm not rooming with him anymore. And then I had to break the news to the other guy who was blaming me for it. This is before we even got to the hotel. Some of the things that were done on the plane, one of the players came down to me and said, you better get up here. Nobody prepares you for that. No, to a certain extent, nowadays we all laugh about it. And it's then we put up the time and the repercussions of it. It wasn't just the players who were at fault. Don't get me wrong, it wasn't just the players, there was 1 or 2 other people. And that's some of the things you have to deal with. Now, when you're asking me about European football and everything else, and there was a whole load of stuff that was ordered on the plane as a laugh and a joke that backfired spectacularly. There was a guy who actually left the club because of an incident with his employers, and the guy who had, I can't say too much about it because the guy nearly lost his job because of a certain incident on the plane. And then on the way back, it got even worse. The match itself, there had a couple of players who turned up for them and played, and we were holding on big time. Tony got sent off, and then Anthony Tuchel went at the goal. And of course, Anthony didn't want to go and goal, which he made perfectly clear to me. He didn't want to go. We had a really good chance, about 5 minutes from the end, which could have changed the whole thing completely. I mean, I've taken shortcuts here, but it just destroyed the whole year, and we never recovered from it. In terms of relationships between players, which I had to try and fix, to no avail, I might add. Even today, some of those relationships have never been repaired. But that's the joys of managing a football club, which when people go to the Brandywell, you've no idea the level this goes on, and the meeting that the players had with the board. I'm sitting there sort of, you're a spectator, you're watching it all unfold, and you're saying, gee, what are you doing? What are you doing? It was just an awful time. The match itself, it was a bit of a press conference afterwards, it got a bit touchy as well, as they always do. At that time, I had a bit of a go with 1 or 2 of their players who who were ducking and diving and all the usual stuff and typical, and it got a bit touchy. And it was just on the back of just the entire trip. I remember Jim McLaughlin saying to me that one of the worst things about a European trip, particularly back in those days, is it, and I had the experience at a couple of clubs, because it was a bonus of getting into Europe. It was a jolly going away. That was a reward. But what also happened was that, no, we want 100 quid, which is a lot of money back then, by the way. You know, and the bonuses, what's our European bonus? Yeah, I remember the night before we played Everton, I played for Finars. They spent 5 minutes talking about the match and then an hour and a half arguing over the bonus. In a school room in Belmont School, I think it was. We're Hearts trained at the time. They spent an hour and a half arguing about bonuses. You know, and Jim used to say it used to be a nightmare at Dundalk. It was Christmas before the team started to play because of the damage that had been done. It wasn't bonuses now in Bulgaria, but it was a pity because we were a good side.
Going into the away game, obviously you have that 1-0 cushion. Did you feel that maybe you could sneak something out there?
You always do. You always do. There always is a part of you never been as a player or a manager, no matter who was playing, thinking I had a chance. You always think you've got a chance. It's a two-horse race. I've been lucky enough to be involved in some of the biggest upsets of all time. And I've also been a victim of one or two of the biggest upsets of all time. So every time you go into a match, anything can happen. Anything can happen. Going down after 30 seconds, the referee makes a terrible mistake. But you go in the Bulgaria match, I learned from previous matches, particularly a lot of the Eastern Europeans, their mentality is, particularly if it's the away leg first, they go, they enjoy the spuds, they enjoy the food, they enjoy the experience. We'll go 0-0, right, get them back to our place. That's their mentality. That was their mentality. And I knew that when Sofia came to us, it would be all right. Wouldn't be great. Now, what they were going to be like over there, I wasn't sure. Now, they had a couple of guys who could play, and they turned up. There's one wee particular guy who out there, and he was causing us all kind of problems. And that was one of those where we were hanging on at 2-0, and they know that we only need one goal. It's amazing the way the last 10, 15 minutes changed in the match. It's amazing how it changed. Then we had a great chance, and it just went past the post. How fine the line it is.
Yeah, you were 2-0 down after 29 minutes. You started the game as 4-5-1, went back to 4-4-2. Did you have much more joy with the 4-4-2 then?
You go and you try to keep it tight, and then given everything and such, I used to do this psychology, but before matches, I didn't even bother in Sofia. Things were that bad. It was basically before the match, there wasn't a great deal said. And you know that there's things simmer on and off. And you're saying, as long as we don't get beat 6. And you go in on a wing and a prayer, and you say, right, okay, let's make ourselves difficult to beat. Then they come out. The difference between my experience of playing in Europe is the difference between the pace of the game at home as opposed to the pace and the tempo of the game away from home is miles apart. And that was the case at Sofia. It was one of those where what might have been, you know, in terms of the whole trip, the organisation of it, everything else, a lot of things that had been simmering for quite a while. And it just culminated and it ended up a catastrophe. And in many regards, I was a spectator with it. Thank God, it was a trip from hell. But, you know, when it goes to Europe, and, you know, I have a really, really great memories of playing in Europe. You know, playing against Villa at White Hart Lane, and playing at Benfica, you know, playing at Goodison Park and stuff like that, and fantastic memories. But Sofia was just horrendous. And I mean, as a manager, it was absolutely horrendous, and it just destroyed the team and the club for months.
If you take away the hellish side of it all,
Mm-hmm.
and you just remember the Brandywell side of it, as you mentioned, part-time team, part-time league, different setup to what was going on at the time. Is it actually a proud moment in Derry City history that should be held in higher regard?
Yes, without any shadow of a doubt. It gets overlooked. It gets overshadowed. And to some extent, I understand that the role that Stephen's team done. You know, Gothenburg and, you know, going over to Scotland and the win that they had and everything else and Paris Saint-Germain. That was incredible. But I remember at the end of the match, the elation, we've won a European match for the first time since F. Keelan. And the buzz you get from that. As bad as the second leg was, the first leg was incredible. The atmosphere in the ground that night was electric. And you got a inside seat for it. It was one of the best experiences of my life. And I've said it before, I was lucky enough to win the league, and I won the league in the Brandywell. I don't think there's enough credit given that team either. You know, if you ask most of the people in Derry who was the last manager to win the league, they'd probably say Stephen Kenny. You know, it's unreal. It's unreal, but that's the way it is. Obviously, the events 2 weeks later soured a whole lot of stuff with that. That night itself was amazing, incredible. The atmosphere in the Brandywell, and particularly when Harry scored that wonder goal, the roar inside and the Brandywell was something else.
My thanks to Felix Healy for his time in doing this interview. Don't forget to watch and listen to our previous European special interviews with the likes of Raymond van der Gouw, as well as Neil Bennett's story of representing Derry City in Cyprus against Apol Nicosia. So make sure you subscribe, like and comment on our content here on Drive 105's Match Night Live's YouTube channel. My name is Dee Kern, and as always this service is brought to you by Paul Martin Menswear.